Alright guys, so the other day we talked about the process of mitosis, and we took a special look at the 4 phases of mitosis, which are prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. If you need to go back and re-watch the video where we went over this graphic organizer, please pause this video and do so now. What we want to take a look at today is this extra use for mitosis, which is asexual reproduction. So once again, this is going on your graphic organizer from the other day. So we know that mitosis can be used to replace old and damaged cells. We know that mitosis can be used for growth and development. We also know that mitosis can be used for asexual reproduction. So now we have to look at what types of asexual reproduction are there. And the types that we're going to focus on today are budding, cloning, fission, vegetative reproduction, and animal regeneration, also known as fragmentation. So if you've done your, which of course you have, your textbook outline for lesson 2 already, we went into each of these things and briefly discussed them. So what we want to do now is we want to flip our graphic organizer over to the back, which if you're doing this online, this graphic organizer is in your OneDrive, your OneNote, or you could download the image and you do it that way. So what we want to do is we want to define each of these reproductive processes, and we want to draw a picture of each of these reproductive processes. But first, we have to establish what is asexual reproduction. It says, what role does mitosis play in asexual reproduction? And we know that asexual reproduction is a mitotic process, just meaning that asexual reproduction uses mitosis to work. It also says, what does this mean about things that reproduce asexually? Since we know that mitosis takes one parent cell and makes 2 daughter cells, then we have to have our parents and daughters looking identical, because our parent cells and our daughter cells in mitosis are getting the same exact genetic information because we're making an identical copy of that cell. So therefore, we have one parent produces identical offspring. There is no variation, because it is a copy of the parent. So now let's get into our different types. Our first type that we're going to talk about is vegetative reproduction. And vegetative reproduction is just when a segment of a plant is taken and planted to form a new separate organism.
For VIP to Ms. Cooper, please do so at this time. Also, remember you have to take attendance at the beginning of every class period. Thank you.
Okay. So with that said, let's say you have some crabgrass. So you have this grass growing out in your yard and things like that, and underneath there is a root system that connects to another set of crabgrass, right? And so that new root system can become an entirely new organism on its own. Same thing as if you have, you might have a tree branch, or shrubs are really good about this, where you take a specific segment off of it, like a little branch, and you grow it in the dirt over time. So we have a little time clock, and it makes an entirely new organism there. Fission are how prokaryotes reproduce. If we think back to our notes from the very first day of class, we remember that prokaryotes are single-celled, very simple organisms. And all they're doing here is copying DNA and divide. So you might have a prokaryotic cell right here with your nucleoid, which is that loosely clumped genetic information. It duplicates that genetic information, and then it eventually splits into two separate prokaryotic organisms. Another one that we're going to talk about is animal fragmentation. And this is when dismemberment of an animal results in two organisms. So for instance, if we have a starfish and we take a piece of that starfish and we cut it off, then not only do we have the original starfish that's going to regrow that limb, but we also have that one limb that was cut off is going to regrow an entire starfish. So the injury of this one starfish resulted in two new organisms being formed. The next one is budding. It says, what is it? It is a smaller, identical organism grows off of the parent organism. And it detaches when mature, which means it's just ready to live on its own. So a really good example of this are succulents and cacti and things like this. So this is just one form of a cacti right here that you might see. And let's say that this one little piece right here starts growing off on its own, and once it gets large enough, it's going to fall to the ground, and over time it's going to recreate an entire cacti all on its own. Cloning is simply where scientists take a single cell or clump of cells and copy them to make an organism. An example of this that was used in your book is a tissue culture. So let's take a very ugly daisy, for instance. Don't judge me. Okay, so we have our daisy, and we're going to take a tissue culture of that stem. And that stem is going to be used to make an entirely new organism. So we're going to put that stem in a petri dish, we're going to let it grow and mature, and then we're going to have an entirely new daisy by the end of it. And that's what cloning is. You'll need to study these types of asexual reproduction. You also have an assignment after this for essentially researching an organism that reproduces asexually, and you'll have to identify which of these methods it uses to reproduce.